Leaders from the Association of Southeast Asian Nations will meet with President Biden today. They're expected to discuss an array of issues, including trade and the ongoing war in Ukraine. So to talk more about this, we want to bring in Anthony Nelson. He's a vice president in East Asia and Pacific practice at the business strategy firm Albright Stonebridge Group. Thanks for joining us. First off, I want you to sort of set the scene. Where are we now in terms of the relationship between the U.S. and countries in this region? Just to remind people, former President Trump pulled the U.S. out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is a trade agreement. So what are some of the challenges that the Biden administration will be facing when it comes to rekindling some of these relationships?
The Obama administration was extremely focused on ASEAN and pitched the TPP as the centerpiece of its economic strategy for the region. So when the Trump administration pulled out, it really left the U.S. without an economic agenda for the region. And because of political realities, the Biden administration hasn't really been able to put forward a real trade agreement component. There isn't any market access component to some of the proposals that it's made, the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework. So it leaves the U.S. trying to find alternatives for where it can discuss key issues with Southeast Asia, like supply chains, like digital transformation, that will find some alignment without having to go through the congressional process on free trade, which just isn't moving these days.
So here's sort of the conundrum, I would think, for the Biden administration. This is a region that wants to rekindle some of these trade agreements. They want a healthy trade relationship. China, in the meantime, has been pretty aggressive and assertive, using sort of economic diplomacy, but also militarily being aggressive in the region. What does the U.S. have to offer that will combat the growing influence that China is having in the region? Keeping in mind, we're talking about a bunch of different countries. They don't all feel the same way that the U.S. does about China.
Absolutely. There's not complete strategic alignment between the U.S. and ASEAN. However, ASEAN countries value their independence. They value their freedom of action. The association really was formed to create a counterbalance to some of the great powers, not just China and the U.S., but also India, that surround the region. So the fact that the U.S. can show commitment, can show a willingness to engage at a high level, that's really important to ASEAN. And it's something that if the Biden administration can maintain and continue to see leaders participating in some of the major ASEAN-related meetings and events that continue to have a sort of steady drumbeat of engagement, that will have a positive effect. You're never going to escape the fact that these countries are right on the border with China, that China is the largest trading partner for almost everybody. But the fact is that these countries do want the U.S. engaged in the region.
We've talked a lot about Russia's invasion of Ukraine. It seems to have impacted many, many things. I'm wondering about the impact on America's focus on other things. This was somewhat unexpected, and it's part of the reason why this meeting is happening a little bit later than expected. Is the war in Ukraine going to have an impact on the type of engagement that the U.S. may have been able to have if it wasn't focused on Ukraine, if it wasn't focused on aid for Ukraine and all that sort of stuff?
So there's a long history of U.S. presidential administrations declaring that this time we're going to focus on Asia, and then being drawn away by events in other parts of the world. The Biden administration is really working hard to counter that, talking about how Ukraine has some universal significance, and it's not something that ASEAN countries want to see ever replicated in Asia. Now, the view as to who is at fault and the genesis behind this invasion varies pretty heavily depending on who you talk to across the region. However, the Biden administration, I think, has done a good job of making clear to ASEAN countries, and particularly some of the partners that we work with most often in Southeast Asia, like Singapore, that this isn't something that is a distraction from overall U.S. presence. It's something that has global significance.
Anthony Nelson, great talking to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.